I'm so excited to have you on the show, Dr. Anna Garrett. I feel like I'm getting a personal private coaching session with you, which is awesome, all about women's health. And I have to tell you, the first thing I read this morning on Facebook was a post that my mom shared about how to recognize the signs of when you're having a heart attack and what you should do. And the final thing at the very, very, very bottom excuse me, of this thing was, oh, and by the way, if you're a woman, the symptoms are different. And I'm like, this is bullshit. Sorry, if you're a guy listening to this episode, we're here to talk about women's stuff today. And you should listen so that you can support your significant other if your significant other is a woman. But the truth of the matter is, things are not the same for men and women. So I want to talk to you today about women's health. I want to talk to you about a whole bunch of things I want to talk to you about hormones. I want to talk to you about cortisol. I want to talk to you about vitamin J. I want to talk to you about exercise and food, all the good stuff. So thank you for being here.
I am so delighted. And yes, it is bullshit that they only talked about men because heart attacks are the number one killer of postmenopausal women. So
right.
It's like, can we just going to skip that part?
Right. You know what? I'm going to find that post and I'm going to send it to you. And you could do a post and say, let me fix this. And you can fix it and do it for women. Because it's like when I was at Strategic Coach a few weeks ago and I sent you a picture of the new Peter Diamandis' book. I know I butchered his last name. And there's like one chapter about women's health. And I'm like, WTF, why are we always putting women's health on the back burner? Why is it always an addendum versus the norm? And so I want to thank you for the work that you have been doing for, over a decade, I know, on women's health, because you've been doing this work for as long as I've known you, and I've known you, I think it's close to 2 decades. So I want to say thank you for putting a stake in the ground for women's health and for being a voice of reason for women. I have personally referred friends of mine, colleagues of mine to you, and I know that they have nothing but great things to say about you and your work. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's been quite a journey.
It has. All right. So what I want to talk about today is women's health. But I really also want to talk about it through the lens of we kind of like not just women in general, but women entrepreneurs too. Because I believe that sometimes women entrepreneurs are wired to bulldoze through things and they miss some of the signals that they should be picking up on. So let's start by talking a little bit about hormones. How does the hormonal reality of women, especially in midlife, so perimenopause, menopause, affect us and how we show up in life and business differently than men? Like, what is it about that season that women need to really know and think about that guys don't?
Oh, wow. Well, we could just talk about this and not go anywhere else. So I'll start with guys first because it's a little less complicated. So in men, testosterone falls over the years, and by the time they're 60, they have very little testosterone. And that really manifests itself as just kind of a lack of drive or sexual issues, and it's fairly easily fixed with testosterone replacement, and then you're done.
Right.
Or some Viagra. Here, have some.
A little blue pill.
No. And the women are just like, wait a minute, why don't I have a little blue pill? Anyway, but for women, as your hormones decline, so you have 3 that get to decline. You've got progesterone and estrogen and testosterone, and progesterone is the first one to go, and how that usually shows up is new anxiety or in problems with insomnia that you haven't had before, or crime scene periods. So imagine standing in a meeting and all of a sudden, you know, things are gushing and you're like, oh my God. And then as you move through
I wasn't expecting that today.
Yeah, exactly. And then as you move through the menopause transition, you start to get the hot flashes and the vaginal dryness and the dry eyes and skin that's crepey. And so there's just a lot more symptoms and a lot more to manage. And if you are thinking about it from the lens of an entrepreneur or somebody that's a C-level executive in a company, if you're not sleeping well, you've got brain fog, you can't think straight, your moods are all over the place. If you're anxious, you're just running in this hamster wheel in your mind all day long. And honestly, I have seen people who I've had clients who couldn't drive anymore. They couldn't function in their business anymore. I had one woman that I talked to in the UK who basically had to give up her job because she literally could not think anymore. And she was like in charge of HR for a company. So there's just a lot more to it. And some of it's subtle. Some of it's just, gee, I don't really feel like doing that today. And then some of it's just complete dysfunction.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, for a lot of women, you don't realize that there's something you can do to kind of balance your hormones and get them back to normal. And so we think that this is just symptomatic of, I'm not eating healthy enough, I'm not exercising enough, I'm getting older. And you think that there's nothing you could do to make it stop, right?
Or you go to your doctor and you're sort of listing off these symptoms that sound like a lot of other things. And, in the US, the typical medical visit is designed to be 7 minutes long. And so what happens is you end up with a prescription for antidepressants or sleeping pills or birth control pills, none of which solve the underlying problem. It's like slapping Band-Aids on things and they send you on your way, because it's impossible to sit down with somebody and have an in-depth conversation about hormones and what are your goals and, all that in 7 minutes. You just can't do it, which is why I love my business, because I can do that.
Right. You can give women the time and attention they need.
Absolutely.
So let's, talk a little bit about burnout, because I think burnout is definitely on the rise. What does burnout look like in women, and how is burnout different from just being busy or I feel like some of the symptoms that you just described in terms of your hormones not being in sync could also be symptoms that people associate with burnout. So what do you see when it comes to women and burnout? And are they being misdiagnosed with burnout? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think, burnout is a constellation of things. So I think I experienced burnout about 4 years ago. And I just got to a point where nothing about my business brought me joy. And I was basically, grinding out 7 days a week. I had gotten past the point where I still had a part-time job. But I remember when I was still doing some fill-in work where every weekend I was having to do my blog post and try to work on the business and then try to see clients kind of on the days. It was just too much. And so burnout can look like apathy, where you just don't care about anything. It can look like mood issues where you're like yelling and screaming at your kids. It can look like not sleeping. It can look like emotional eating. I mean, there's just so much that goes along with it. And, I don't know. I mean, this is one of those questions where I'm not sure about what the answer is. It's not really a diagnosis. I mean, I worked with a therapist, I worked with a life coach, and I finally managed to get myself into a situation that felt a lot better for me. Mm-hmm. I have clients that I work with where I say, well, one of the first things I ask them is, what do you do that brings me joy? And they look at me like I'm speaking Chinese.
Right.
And so one of the exercises we do is I have them create a list of things that take 5, 15, or 30 minutes to do that they actually enjoy. And it can be as simple as going out and just letting the sunshine on their face for 5 minutes. It can be walking the dog. It can be whatever, because we're all different, right? Because what
So,
brings you joy might not bring me joy.
right, right. So it sounds to me like one of the symptoms of burnout is that lack of joy or that lack of
Hmm.
interest in things that maybe once brought you joy. And, you are obviously still engaged in your business. Were there any things that you specifically did that brought you back into the business with more interest and engagement and to find your joy again? Like you talk about vitamin J,
I
and
do.
you're the only person I've heard talk about vitamin J. So give us a dose of vitamin J and talk to us a little bit about that. Like, how do you get that back when it's missing?
Um, well, part of my vitamin J is on this map on the wall back here. This is every place I've been in the world. So
I
that's
see a
that.
lot of pins.
There's a lot of pins. But obviously, I can't do that every single day. I think, one of the things that my coach had me do was start to create more white space on my calendar because I am, I'd love to talk about the Enneagram, but we won't go there. I am notorious for filling up all the space on my calendar because I feel like if I'm not being productive, then I'm not contributing to society, right? So I'm one of those people, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's some of us are just wired that way. So one of the things I love to do is photography, and so I would take half days and I'd go out and photograph. I have a very lovely camera setup. I will be honest that today, most of my photographs are done with my iPhone because it's really easy to stick it in my pocket. And like the other day, I just went over and walked at the Biltmore Estate. I'm taking pictures of things. Um, I spend time with my grandchildren. So I just had to figure out what I wanted, you know, not what was my my business supposed to look like on somebody else's terms because it's my business. I can do whatever the hell I want, right? Um, and that's how I started and just really kind of getting into what my priorities were. At the time, my marriage was kind of disintegrating. So it was just this whole constellation of stuff. Um,
But that's not unlike anyone else, right?
right.
And so I appreciate you sharing all of this because I think that sometimes I think we wonder, am I just tired? Am I burnt out? Or is something wrong with me? And I know you do testing, which I think is
Hmm.
really important to help women understand where they're at and so that, if there is it's not that something is wrong with you, but maybe you need some hormone therapy or maybe you need something else, but understanding what the driving force is behind how we're feeling and not accepting that how we're feeling is normal if it's not necessarily normal.
Well, and part of what I do with my clients, it's not just about the testing and the results. It's having conversations about, traumas that have happened in their lives or, what are their goals? There are so many women who are in midlife who have just completely forgotten who they are. And when you just continue to give and give and give and give, you can't do that anymore at a certain point. And that's when burnout actually happens, is when you've just given all you have to give. And I find that the closer you get to 50 and older, the less you are willing to tolerate, what everybody else tries to suck from you, right?
I had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Christine Kane, and she
Mm.
said to me, once you reach menopause, it's really hard to make a woman do something if she doesn't want to do it. I think that's right.
Well, exactly. And why should we all be doing things that we really don't want to do?
Mhm.
Um, and, we think about the things that happen in our lives and we just kind of blow things off sometimes. And I have a friend um, who ended up in the hospital last week with a heart rate of 33 and a blood pressure of 60 over 40, both of which are exceptionally low.
Mhm.
Um, and he lost his house in the hurricane here and has done nothing. It thinks there's no trauma associated with any of this. And they send him home, tell him to eat more salt, and here, take these hydrocortisone pills, and life will be good. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's called an adrenal crisis. And you can't power your way through that. So I think a lot of us look at things that happen to us, and we feel like if we reach out for help that we're being weak in some way. And
Just
I will
suck it
say
up.
that's right. And therapy is the best money I've ever spent in the several times that I have done that. And I have a therapist now who is wonderful. And there are a number of us in this region who share her. But I look at something like the hurricane that happened here, and there's not a single one of us that was not impacted in some way, small or great. And you can't just sweep that kind of stuff under the rug. It just doesn't work, because your body catches up with you. And, for your listeners, if you want to know what stress does, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I can't recommend that enough if people are thinking that they're experiencing burnout and they're wondering how much stress may be contributing to that.
Great. We will put that book in the show notes so that if anybody wants to link to it or get to it, they can. So let's talk a little bit about vitamin J, like really vitamin J. So you wrote a post which actually prompted me to reach out to you about women needing more vitamin J in their life. And I know you just talked to me about, figuring out what brings you joy and carving out more white space to, in your calendar for the things that bring you joy. But why is it so important that women make time for this?
Because otherwise you just become an empty shell. And like I just told you, so many women have forgotten what they enjoyed doing before they, got married, had kids, had a career, did all the things that we all are told that we need to do. Oh, you can have it all. Well, no, you can't. And try telling that to my 30-some-year-old daughter. Yes, she still thinks she can, but we only get one trip around this block, right? Mm-hmm. And if we're not doing things that bring us joy, then we are totally missing the boat.
Do you think guilt prevents us from seeking out joy?
Yeah, because we think it's selfish if we take care of ourselves, because we as women are trained in that mode of thinking. I think it's happening less with the generations that are behind you and me. But I still see, like my daughter, she makes all her husband's appointments and does all the things around the house. And I'm like, he's off playing golf. I'm like, no, it's not supposed to be like this. You have created that. But I think it's sad when women get to the end of their lives and say, I wish I had, spent more time doing X, Y, or Z that they actually enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about travel, specifically for me, was my aunt, when I was, I don't know, I might have been in my late 40s. She's like, go ahead and start traveling now, because someday you're not going to be able to. And I really took that to heart. I was like, oh, okay. So I have really made an effort to do some trips that I know I will be physically unable to do when I'm, say, in my 80s, although I'm really working on still being able to do that when I'm in my 80s. Mm-hmm. But, part of that's luck. So
one of my favorite books on that topic is Die with Zero.
Yes.
And the author talks about, being cognizant of the fact that when you do get to your late 70s and 80s, you may not be as physically able to do some of the travel that you can do right now. And you may not be in good enough health to do it. So do the things now. Don't wait. And I think a lot of us are waiting until oh, wait until I have this much money or wait till I get to this age. And none of this is guaranteed tomorrow. I saw a stat on Instagram last week. It said 150,000 people a day on average die. So if you woke up this morning, you're one of the 150,000 that didn't. But one of those days, you're going to be one of those 150,000. So it's important that we are doing things that are fun for us. One of the things that I do to, create joy in my life too is I'm always trying to plan something to look forward to.
Me too.
So it's like, I always want to know what's that next thing that I'm going to do, the next place that I'm going to go, what is that thing that I'm going to do that brings me joy? And, another simple thing that I've done is, I saw Zig Ziglar speak, I don't know, over a decade ago. And, one of the things that he said on stage is that he'd never read a fiction book in his life because everything that he read was about enriching his mind. And so aside from Diana Gableton and the Outlander series, I stopped reading fiction and I started reading all these business books. And lately, I've gotten back into just reading fiction books. My next door neighbor downloaded 100 plus books on my Kindle, and I'm having so much fun just reading for joy instead of reading because I got to learn something to teach my clients. So, I think when we talk about joy, it doesn't have to be a great, big, huge trip. It could be as simple as sitting outside with your Kindle for 10 minutes a day, reading a book that you're interested in versus a book that you feel like you have to read.
Well, for me, like going out on my deck and getting my flower pots planted for the summer and, making dinner for a friend or just, it can be really, really simple things. Like having a good bottle of wine. Now, everything in the news says alcohol is going to kill us all.
We're going to die one day anyway.
I'm just like, well, if I've got to go, then if I got a decent glass of wine in my hand, I'll be okay. So, everything in moderation, my friends. So yeah, it doesn't have to be anything exotic. Going and watching my grandchildren play soccer. They're like little herding animals, but it's still fun. I'm out there, I'm outside, I'm watching them. They're having a good time.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about health span versus lifespan. So you and I have had conversations about this before. And I'd love to hear your perspective on, maybe you can just educate our listeners on the difference between health span and lifespan. And then what are some of the things that people should be thinking about in terms of prolonging their health span so that it is aligned with their lifespan?
So lifespan is just what it sounds like. It's from day zero or day one to the end. And however long you get is however long you get. But health span is the span of years that you have to live that are quality. Okay,
healthy years.
Healthy, quality years where you are able to go and do the things that you want to do. And this is being talked about a lot more. There are all the biohacking bros who are, doing this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, I ain't got time for that. But I do have time for some other things. So I think for women especially, and that's where I'm going to focus because that's where I focus. The number one thing you can do is lift heavy stuff. Okay. So working out with heavy weights is going to keep your muscles strong, going to keep your bones strong, will allow you to get out of a chair without having to kind of push yourself up. And so that's my number one thing. I started lifting weights 15 years ago, and it has made a huge difference in my life and about how I feel about myself because I'm strong. I can pick up heavy bags of dog food or whatever. The second thing is sleep. This is something where we get into perimenopause and menopause, and people say to me, well, Dr. Anna, if I could sleep, I would. And they have a point, because sleep is one of the things that tends to go. But hormone replacement therapy can make a massive difference in how you sleep. And in fact, it was the game changer in my life for that. sleep is where our bodies heal. It's where inflammation gets resolved. It helps our moods. It just helps so many things. Eating to support your body, so eating enough protein, that's an important piece of it. I think we still maybe haven't stumbled on the right amount of protein. I mean, I don't know if you read, there's so much conflicting evidence
I know,
online.
like read your weight in protein.
I'm like, well, okay, so I'm going to have to just eat nothing but meat. And there are people that do that. But that's just not what I want to do. But I do make an effort to at least try to think about it.
Yeah, me too.
And then setting boundaries, saying no. I mean, that's a complete sentence. And a lot of us aren't very good at that. I personally have gotten very good at that, especially with my boundaries around sleep. So, and then staying connected and curious, because I think being a lifelong learner is a super important piece of lengthening your health span.
I agree. I think when you stop learning, you basically die. Like,
Yeah.
I look at, so my husband used to be in law enforcement, and I can't tell you how many people that he used to work with in under 5 years of retirement passed away.
Yeah.
And it's because they're so tied into their identity and their jobs that when they didn't have the job anymore, it was like they lost who they were. And so I think staying curious and learning new things, it's such a huge, important part of your health.
And I think, thinking about retirement, which is, not quite where I am and not quite where you are. When you think about retirement, you need to have a plan. And I don't mean a financial plan. I mean a plan for what are you going to do with yourself. This is back to the vitamin J. What brings you joy? What would you like to be involved in? What would you like to learn? I mean, there's UNC Asheville here has a center called OLLI. It's something about lifelong learning. I don't know what it all stands for, but it's for retirees, and they have a whole curriculum of classes you can take. And so, I'd like to learn how to make stained glass, but I haven't, created the time for that yet.
Right.
So it's just, there's a lot of things you can do to extend your health span. And then there's the whole supplement world that we could get into, but that would take a whole nother podcast. But just paying attention and learning about health and, I don't want to be one of these people who's putting on a rucksack and running up and down hills, every day. Yes, it's good for your bones, but I don't enjoy that kind of thing. So
Right. But I think that what I'm hearing you say is, you probably didn't enjoy weightlifting when you started either,
but I do now.
But you also knew how important it was, so you started. And so I think sometimes we have to also recognize that there are things that we may not like or enjoy when we start. And part of it is the discomfort of not knowing what we're doing. And that it's important that we lean into those things, because it is a hell of a lot harder to get fit when you are 75 than it is when you're 55 or you're 35. And so if you can start those habits today, it'll make it easier to maintain those habits as you go along. So I'm going to use my mom as an example. My mom has been a heavy smoker her entire life. She was diagnosed with COPD many years ago, and her health span, like her lifespan has exceeded her health span. And she is not physically well enough to travel. She's never been to Florida. She's, never been to our home in Georgia. She didn't make it to Nova Scotia because it's too much exertion for her. She's on oxygen pretty much 24/7 now. And so for her to leave the house and do things, it's really difficult. She's only in her 70s. And so I think about that and I think, okay, if my mom knew when she was in her 20s and 30s what smoking would create for her in her life in her 60s and 70s, if she really knew, if somebody had been able to paint a picture and she really understood it, maybe she would have quit. Maybe she would have done things differently. I don't know. Maybe not. Like you and I are both saying, hey, you know what? They say wine's not good for you, but we're still having a glass of wine. But I think that people don't always recognize that these little things that you do, they're habits that are stacking. And you can stack good habits or you can stack bad habits. But when you stack a lot of bad habits, it's a lot harder to undo the damage than if you start stacking good habits now. And I think for women, I mean, you're the expert on this, not me, but I think we are just wired to take care of everybody but ourselves. And it's time for us to carve out time to take care of ourselves too. Because most of us, not all of us, most of us are married to men, and most of the men die before the women. Like the stats say, like I'm not, nothing offensive to same-sex partnerships and all that. I'm just talking about stats. Statistically, there are more men and women married, and statistically, men typically die before women. So, ladies, take care of yourself, because chances are you're going to have to live this life on your own at some point. You need to be well enough to do it.
Well, and if if we go back to the whole business focus, you want to be able to be productive and have fun running your business well into whenever it is you decide you want to not do that anymore, and you want to have a choice. You don't want to have the choice forced on you. And then suddenly you have a whole separate set of decisions you have to make. And that's no fun. I always want to have a choice. I want to have plan A, B, and C at my disposal.
100%. I'm a member of Strategic Coach, and Dan Sullivan celebrated his birthday in May last year at an event, that CoachCon in Nashville, and he turned 80. And he is still sharp as a tack. He's in great shape. He's fit. He's running his workshops. Like he isn't retired, and he's 80 years old. Now, retirement looks different for all of us. I mean, you can work as much or as little as you want. You can be semi-retired and working less hours, but still working. But you can't still be working at 80 if you want to work at 80, if you don't have the cognitive abilities because you stopped being curious and learning things, or you don't have the physical abilities because you stopped taking care of your body.
Right. Exactly. Okay.
Let's talk about cortisol.
That's another podcast.
I know. So give me the 2 or 3 things that women need to know about cortisol. Like, give me the Coles Notes version, the short version of what do we need to know and understand about cortisol, and what are some things that we can do to try to keep our cortisol levels in balance?
So, main thing you need to know is that your body will make cortisol at the expense of all your other hormones. So, if you are under a great deal of stress and your body needs more cortisol, it is not going to be making sex hormones, because it is going to be running for your life, whether there's something you actually need to run for your life from or not. So that's the main thing to know. It's like the conductor in the orchestra.
Okay.
And so it's made by your adrenal glands. And so if you want to make sure that you have enough cortisol to meet your stress needs, you need to make sure that your adrenal glands are in tip-top shape, because you're also going to need those to make hormones after menopause. So how do you do that? Making sure that your nutrition is good. It's all the things I just talked about: nutrition, sleep, stress management. I personally think that stress is at the root cause pretty much of every hormone imbalance under the sun, unless you're getting exposed to toxic chemicals all the time. So managing cortisol is a lifestyle project. It can be supported with supplements, but it really is a lifestyle project. And so If your cortisol is too high, you're going to feel anxious and wired, and your blood pressure is going to be high, and you're going to be craving sugar. And so those are kind of signs that it's on the high side, low side, low blood pressure, salt cravings, can't get out of bed, tired all the time.
Oh, it's the story of my life.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it's been all these years. Paul just says, do you even have a pulse? Because my blood pressure is always super, super low. And I would take a bag of salted chips over chocolate any day.
Well, I would too, but not because it's my cortisol. I just happen to like salt better. But there's two ends of that spectrum. And so that can be tested. And if you're going to test that, you want to look at it at 4 points during the day, because you want to see what does the pattern look like in addition to what the levels look like. A single blood test done in the morning is not going to tell you crap about what your body's doing the rest of the day. And it's not something you can just power through. So like my friend I was talking about, he's going to be back out running again, probably shortly. And you just can't. You can't do a lot of physical exertion when your cortisol is super low. So you need gentle walks, yoga, stretching, that kind of stuff. When it's higher, you can do an increased level of things. But your body makes it at the expense of everything else. Can't power through it. Get it checked out if you think it's a problem.
So talk to me about you do testing, you help people. So talk to me a little bit about that service that you provide and what it looks like and how people could work with you. If we have, women listening right now and they're thinking, gee, I resonate with some of what she said. I really should get myself checked out. What's the first step? How should they contact you? Like what's it look like?
So the first step is to schedule a consultation with me, because in that 45 minutes that we talk, it's not a free consultation, but we have a good chunk of time to talk about what's going on and then really map out a strategy of what your individualized testing might look like. And so the main ways I start with people are either hormones or gut, depending on what the conversation is. I'm about to start, talking to people about genetics as well, because there's a whole layer there that can be looked at. And then there's functional testing down the road from any of those three things. So the consultation really is the first place, because without that, I don't really know how to guide somebody.
Okay. And where should they go if they're interested in doing a consultation with you?
So if you go to my website, dranagarrett.com, there are buttons on the homepage that say schedule a call, and just click on that. You pay for the call, and then it takes you through the scheduling process.
Awesome. So it's not really a consultation. You're actually giving people advice on this call.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. That sounds great. What else, Anna? What other parting piece of advice do you have for the women listening right now?
I guess my biggest piece of parting advice is don't suffer in silence, because you really don't have to suck it up. And if your doctor or anybody else tells you, oh, that's just a normal part of aging,
He's probably a guy.
Right. Probably. Because there's help out there, and help may not have MD after its name. It may have PharmD after its name, or may be an acupuncturist or a chiropractor or any number of health providers. But I'm always happy to help refer people to the type of provider I think will benefit them most if I'm not it. So, yeah. And I'm always happy to answer questions too. So they can email me at drAnna@dranagarrett.com. Awesome.
That's Dr. Anna, DRANNA at DRANNAGARRETT.com.
Lots of double letters in there.
Yeah. In case any of you are, spelling sensitive, there you have it. Well, Dr. Anna, this was great. I feel like I probably I had 14 questions, and I think I asked you 5. So I may have to have you back another time and go deeper on some of these topics, but I think, we talk a lot about business on this podcast. We talk a lot about sales and marketing and, numbers and strategy and all those things. But the truth is, if you don't have your health, you can't build wealth. And I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing everything that you know about helping women with their health, because every woman who listens to this podcast, and the very smart men that listen to it too, they need their health in check in order to make the impact that they're trying to make in this world. So thank you for spending this time with me today.
Well, I'm happy to do it. I know we've talked about it for a while, and the day finally arrived, so I was so excited.
Yeah, me too. All right. Thank you. And thank you for listening. You can find Dr. Anna at her website, drannagarrett.com, and then you can link out to all of her socials if you want to follow her. But, ladies, if you're listening and you feel like a little something just isn't right, I highly encourage you to reach out to Dr. Anna. And I would not say that if I hadn't recommended her to lots of people that I know and heard them rave about her nonstop. I mean, she came to visit me in Florida one time, and one of my girlfriends acted like she was a freaking celebrity. She was so nervous and excited to see her. So I know she does amazing, amazing work. So
I'm like, who's she talking about? Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right.